I'll call up my next speaker, who is Hemini from the EBU. And you might want to start with one of the previous questions that you were thinking about answering, or you can go straight into your presentation. The floor is yours, Hemini.
Thank you. So I can answer some of the questions as we go along if you want, but otherwise I'll just go through here and then pick them up at the end. So thank you for having me, first of all. My name's Hemini Mehta. I'm from the EBU, the European Broadcasting Union, which most of you will probably know, but if you don't, it happens to be the Union for Public Service Media across Europe and then a little bit beyond. So I see some of our friends are here from across the pond, like CBC, for example. We also have ABC Australia, some in Asia, etc. So that's who we are. So I wanted to give you a quick overview on the types of the work that we're doing for sustainability across the board over EBU, because we don't really get a chance to give this type of information. So first of all, just to let you know, sustainability is still important, regardless of what's going on in the geopolitics of the world. In fact, with the European CSRD, it's become more and more important. And those that were already on their sustainability journey are still keeping good to their journey and making sure that they get better as time goes along. So that's still something that we're working on, and it's still important to us and our members. So our members, a lot of them still have and continue to be on the path of their net zero strategy. We say that this is a journey and not a destination, because what was good a few years ago is changed to what is good today. So every year it gets more and more stringent, and so we want to keep to that path and making sure that we continue this net zero strategy for those that do have it, or a solid strategy. And a lot of our members have their strategies that are certified and audited by external organizations like the SBTI, for example. On the legal side, there's still TCFD, so most of our UK members, if not all of them, still perform to the TCFD reporting, and others are now going to be starting to move towards the EU reporting of CSRD. In the Nordics, they've always had legal implications, so they've always had to do reporting for a good few years. And a lot of our members, even though they were not mandated to do them, they've been doing them voluntarily to join in to show how important sustainability is. And at the moment, the biggest scope and the hardest scope for us to deal with is scope 3, which is probably the same for most organizations across the world. But also we've got a big focus on looking at scope 3 category 11, which is the units of goods sold, which is why working with organizations like Greening of Streaming is really important to us, because to measure our units of cost sold, so how much is our content, the energy use of our content being taken, and also how do we measure this, is a conundrum that's been keeping us awake for a few years already, and will keep us awake for a little while longer, I expect. On the production side, we have a lot going on around production and how to make productions in a greener way. So in Germany and France, they already have national legal requirements that they need to adhere to. So in Germany, there's the German Code of Conduct, and in France, that's just come in. So they need to keep to those requirements and be at least minimal green to the requirements that they have in those countries. In the UK, the likes of BBC and ITV and others are all mandated, or all said that they'll be mandated to have their productions Albert certified. So they've reached a certain minimal level to make sure that they are certified. If you are based in the UK, if you watch any of the programs till the end, you'll see that every single one has the Albert stamp at the end. And there are other EBU members outside of the UK using Albert as well, and they're likely to follow the UK broadcasters to make sure 100% of their programs are certified by Albert. The only carbon calculators that do have certification initially was Albert, and now EcoProd in France and our Francophone members have started to get this certification as well. So just to let you know, that's still an ongoing topic, even though with productions, this has been around, the sustainability aspect's been around for a lot longer than what the tech has started to look at. So it just goes to show that it really is a long journey and a long path. And so at the moment, in productions, we know that obviously travel is the largest scope emissions, but what we do know is that thanks to COVID, in a sense, being able to look after travel and do remote productions, etc., is something that we've already started to rein travel on. So the next largest contingent for us to look at is energy, and looking at the idea of how do we reduce diesel generators from sets and move towards cleaner energy. So we're doing some analysis. We've already done some pre-analysis, which goes to show that across all genres at the moment, about 20% on average of the diesel generator is only used. So 80% of its capacity just sits there and is never used. So that shows that if, for example, if we only had to cover 20% or so, that there are greener alternatives around, like batteries and cleaner generators. So that's something that we're digging into at the moment. On the other side, what's happening internally inside the EBU. So we're trying to obviously work with our members on the CSRD side and trying to get them to understand this, because it's a new regulation that's come in. It's also created for all industries and not just media. So to get our heads around it is difficult. So obviously it makes sense for all of us to learn together, just as we are in greening of streaming and collaborating with others. So at the moment, our focus on this is looking at the green narrative, so green storytelling, not only externally to our audiences, which most of you already know about, but also internally inside the organization. So how can we get the sustainability narrative throughout inside the organization, because we tend to do a much better job doing it externally, but not so much on the inside. So that's something we're looking at the moment. We also have a group that looks at classical music, and they've started to do a sustainability group as well, to look at how can orchestras move around and travel and still somehow keep green. What are the alternatives? What are the ways that they can do this in order to be as clean as possible? We also have some work that's being done in sports, because live sports is obviously extremely dirty, as most of us know. So we've just recently, in fact, today, we've just gone and put some sharing information out on the IBU, the International Biathlon Union, and how the members did the Albert certification for that. So if you're interested in that, that's just come out. So there's like 4 documents around that. As I mentioned, that we're looking at power profiling for work and getting data. So just as important as it is for data in tech, it's just as important for us in production as well, because data is something that we cannot change, and it gives us a good picture of what's going on. So we need data, whether we're looking at it from a production point of view or a technology point of view, which I know many of you already know about, because we've been on this journey together. And then the other one is to make our Eurovision Song Contest, which is one of the largest shows on earth, and how can we make that greener? So that's something that we've started to look at since a while, but I guess it formally only went in when it started in Liverpool. So we had a policy that was written, and obviously Liverpool, being done by the BBC, already complied to Albert, but when we had it in Malmo and Basel, we also did some work with the local towns and cities, and also with carbon calculators, etc. But one of the biggest things that we need to do, is one of the questions that's come in already, is with the audiences, what can we do to change user behavior? This is exactly the same thing that we need to do with the Eurovision Song Contest, is how do we change the user behavior on the travel side, because that's going to be the largest, and is the largest part of the footprint. I would say it's at least 80%, if not more, depending on where it's taking place. So the other side why we're here is looking at EBU Technology and Innovation Department, so looking at it from a tech point of view. So we're working, as I said, in fact, the more we dig deeper into tech, the more we realize we don't know. And so therefore, to work with others and collaborate with others is really important for us. So we're working on the IBC accelerator on EcoFlow 2, which is looking at the distribution side. We know that some of our studies have already been done with some of our members on this. So I know the BBC has done a lot of work on this, where they measured their distribution supply chain, but also the Germans have done it as well. So SWR/ARD have also already done that. But it's not an easy thing to do, and those organizations are large. So what we'd like to do is collaborate with others to learn about the different parts of the chain and understand how big they are and what can we do to make them more efficient. Again, keeping to the distribution, we have some EBU member groups. So we have the distribution group, which has done some work around this, are looking at it in terms of procurement. As one of our members said, procurement is sustainability's best friend, because what you can put into your tender requirements and or contracts makes a really big difference, and having that as part of the decision making makes a big difference. So the distribution group has started to do some work on that and understanding how can we procure CDNs, etc., in a much greener way. We know that DBBI has also got a group looking at this along with HBBTV. So we're all working on the same things together. So we should be sharing all of this information. We've also got a 5G Emerge project, which is with the European Space Agency, which is looking at the extra capacity as we move towards streaming becoming our larger part of the way our content is distributed compared to satellite. It's one of the big things that we've been looking at is looking at extra satellite capacity to move between CDNs and IP distribution and the satellite system in a more efficient way to help with the capacity. So as part of that, we want to look at the energy cost of between IP versus satellite, but also the idea that we should be greener, if not exactly the same as the footprint that's there now. And that's one of the key things that we're working on. We're looking at cloud, which has come up. So we already spoke about procurement, but we've also we worked with Humans Not Robots, another organization here within Greening of Streaming, that to look at a small part of our energy use of the cloud that we had. And we've come up with a report on how best we can use the cloud in a more greener way and get some recommendations. We only did it very small, so the results are not as great as we had expected, but it's a start, and we should be looking at it in a larger view and looking at it from a larger pot that we've got. And we also work with the ITU. So we have the Energy Efficient Rapporteur Group, which was called the Energy Aware Broadcasting Group before, but now I think most people, if not all, understand the idea of the footprint of our tech stack being large and getting larger, but we don't have means to measure it. So that's one of the other groups that we've joined up with. And at the moment, we're looking at energy on the end user devices, and we'll be giving an update where we can. On this, we already know with the end user devices, they're the largest part of the footprint. We found ways, we've had a few tests done, which looks at reducing the pixels to make them slightly darker. And that's done with AI, an AI formula. And then the idea is the machine learning model And the idea is that we've seen across all genres that there's a 20% reduction. So if you think about it, it's in terms of energy use, it's not a huge amount, but multiply that by the number of television sets that are out there and the number of hours and content being watched, and all of a sudden a small drip in this idea creates a much bigger pond, if not a lake. So we can save a huge amount of energy. So it's still one of the big things that we're still working on. And working on, again, as Barbara mentioned, it's not something we can do all alone. We need to work together on this. So that's the end of my presentation. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting all my speakers to be so good with timing. We've still got a few minutes. I have a comment/question. You said 10%, 20%, saving 20% of the TV doesn't seem like much. I believe the industry consensus out there's lots of studies with different numbers, but they're all around at least 50% when you're watching on the TV, that 50% of the environmental footprint comes from the TV itself. So saving 20% on the TV is saving 10% on the overall footprint of the whole workflow. Do you agree?
Yes, if you work it out that way, but then it depends on the studies. So some of them have shown that it could be the end user devices up to 80% of the entire workflow. So it depends which study you take then. But we know that regardless, we know that the biggest part is on the end user devices, particularly.
Just a minute. When you're talking, it's really complicated to talk about that. Because when we're talking about watching on a large sitting room TV, then that's obvious. There's over 100 watts typically in most usage cases. So saving 20% of that is a real impact. But when you're watching on a mobile phone, the carbon impact for the mobile phone doesn't come from energy at all. These are the most energy efficient devices humanity's ever built. They do amazing things for almost no energy. So saving 10% energy, it's the embedded carbon there. And I think having a less bright screen does nothing to the embedded carbon. So I think it will depend on the device too.
Yeah, it was on the televisions that we were working on.
Then there was somebody wants to know Alithea wants to know from the audience, you mentioned some cloud research. Will you be able to share any of the data from there? Is it already on the EBU website?
It is. I'll put the link into it after.
Okay. So that's an answer to your question, Alithea, who says thank you. Then I think, where are we for time? Is it time for the next one? Yeah, we're still 2 minutes ahead of time. And your presentation was so crystal clear that I didn't have as many questions that came up. But yeah, just one thing that I wanted to ask Mike. And you said people are going towards net zero and stuff like that. Have you within the EBU been able to make the case that Barbara makes a lot? She didn't much in today's presentation, but a lot of what she talks about is it has to make business sense, that if you're doing something for the environment, if you can't find the business sense in it, then it's much harder. How's that discussion been among the large scale broadcasters?
So we've tended to find that if you were talking about 5 years ago, the myth was that if you wanted to be greener, then it's going to cost you more. And now the conversation's changing slightly to the point where if you go greener, it's going to actually cost you less in some cases. I mean, if you look at new technologies, so if we look at HVO generators compared to diesel generators, the HVOs are more expensive. But the idea is that if we end up seeing more and more people using them where needed, or moving to batteries, smaller batteries, and not taking as much energy with you as you claim that you need, then all of a sudden you do end up getting cost savings on there. So it just
you're talking more on the production side. What about
on the production side? Yeah. On the distribution side, again, we know that we've started. I mean, if you look at most of the CDN providers and cloud providers, they will say that they're moving towards renewable energy. And that's great for the broadcasters because whether we like it or not, whoever you use is part of your scope 3 chain. So what we want to do is make sure that this conversation is true, and how much renewable energy are they using, etc. When they say they're moving towards renewable energy. So yeah, there is, and then obviously, depending on where you are in the world, your own energy that you use for your own buildings and studios, etc., will be a certain percentage of green. And we're talking about Europe, it's high, depending on where you are.
Well, thanks, Hemini. I hope you can stay to the end to join the Q&A at the